You hit record, go for it.
Okay, so what we're going to go through today is what is a quad chart and why do I need one? Um, and my name's James Middleton, and I'm I suppose about 20 year, coming up on 20 years of experience in defence and defence industry, both in and out of uniform, small business, and all the way up to primes. And now run my own company called Ethic Lead, where we help organisations grow and scale through sustainable ethical leadership practices. But quad charts. So in simple terms, a quad chart is a piece of paper that gives information about your business to someone you want to contract with. Now, the reason this is important is because if you engage with a prime or even a tier two supplier potentially, to get onto their approved supplier list. One of the first questions that the supply chain manager is going to ask you is, do you have a capability statement and a quad chart? And those two they're similar, but have distinct functions within defence supply chain. So the capability statement is a lot more detailed. It's very wordy. It's got technical specs, all that sort of stuff in there. The quad chart is the thing that if your business name gets thrown across the table at a trade show or at a supplier engagement meeting, it's going to be the quick and dirty of here's what we do, here's how we do it, and here's how we prove what we say we can do. And while it is not going to necessarily win you business, it needs to be to such a quality and such a level that gets you kept on the table. Because when people from the primes go to big trade shows like Indopac later this year or Land Forces, they're probably going to get a couple of hundred of these things. So if yours waffles on and says generic stuff that really holds no weight, it's going to get tossed in the bin straight away. And I know that sounds a bit harsh, but that's the reality. That everyone wants to contract into defence, but not everyone knows what they're doing. So um, what we can do with this is I'll go through and just give this presentation. And if there are questions that you have, please feel free to throw them in the chat, and I'll get onto them. Or we can wait to the end for a bit of a discussion. Alrighty, here we go. So this is what a quad chart looks like, and I can provide this and a couple of other examples of templates. This is just straight off Canva that I put together, but this is what it looks like. So what it's doing essentially is breaking your who we are, what we do, down into clearly defined areas that can be directly compared with other suppliers and directly compared against project or bid requirements. So one of the things we see quite often here is that people say I've got a quad chart and there's about 6 or 7 different sections on there, or it's just a wall of text. So think about it when you are reading through a presentation or you're trying to get information on something really, really quickly. You don't want a mountain of information. It's just not going to work for you. So the same goes for supplier assessments. We need to be punchy, we need to be sharp, and we need to be talking about exactly what it is we want to do. So first and foremost, if your quad chart doesn't have this, then what's the point? And I have seen this doing a supplier assessments at primes. You get a piece of paper, it has a whole bunch of ISO standards and AS standards, and there's no business name. So how are they supposed to know who you are and what you do if they don't even know who you are? So top of the page should always be your business name, and then your address and a contact email. This is really, really important because while it's okay to have your business address as a PO box, if that's what you have, that's fine. If you're a small business, I mean, I personally have a PO box. It's just easier that way. But if you have a generic info at business or contact at business or admin at business group email inbox, that's the first hurdle that can get you thrown off the table. The people, the engineers, the project managers, the supply chain professionals want to speak to someone real. So if you are the owner of the business or you are the contract focal or whatever it is within your organization, put your name on there. You know, for me, it would be james@ethiclead.com.au, not welcome@ethiclead.com.au. People want to talk to people, and that's the first thing to start building a relationship built on trust. Yeah. So the next section we'll go through is who we are. So this is where we start to break down who the company is, what you're involved in, where you are, and any sort of key points of difference that might be important here. So what I said earlier about your capability document and your capability statement, it is important to have a very short, and I'm talking like one one to two sentences here about what you do. Say from my perspective, it is providing um, leadership, strategy, and governance support to organisations that are scaling. That's something like that. Now, it's up to you what you put in there, but don't waffle on because it's just going to get lost in the noise. Remember, people might be looking at a couple of hundred of these over the course of 2, 3, 4 days. So you really need to hit the mark really, really quickly. You do want to put your location in there. So if you're operating, so like some of the big businesses, you're operating across multiple sites or multiple locations, great. If you're only in one place, that's fine too. If you are happy to work remotely, great, put it in there. Because these are going to be things that when we look at the Australian industry capability, we want to see organisations in Australia that are in the locations that defence wants to work in or defence wants to invest in. So put that information in there. We quite often see stuff in here about who we are as things like family owned or multi-generational family business or those sorts of things there. As much as that does tell a bit of a good news story, defence don't care. Defence don't care if you're a family business. Defence don't care if you've been operating out of the same location for 4 generations of family. That's just reality. What they do care about is businesses that support the contracting and employment targets that have been set for them by the Australian Commonwealth Government. So if you are a veteran, if it's a veteran-owned business or it's an Indigenous-owned, particularly Indigenous-owned, then you need to make sure you're putting that in there because those are things that will start to elevate you above someone else. If they think about it, if they've got two businesses that are the same technical capability, the same size, but one is a Indigenous veteran-owned and one is a not Indigenous veteran-owned, then to meet their targets, that this is the reality we work in, to meet their employment and contracting targets, they're likely to start pushing in that direction. Now, what is important in here though, is if you are not a veteran or Indigenous owned business, but you do have programs or initiatives that are supporting veteran employment, are supporting Indigenous or community and social outcomes, put that in there. Those are huge, huge benefits that start to look at community and social outcomes. So make sure you're putting that in there. Okay, what we do. So what we're talking about here is not a list of projects that you've done. It is not a list of manufacturing techniques or a list of project management frameworks that you use. What we're really talking about here is the value you create for your customers. So what is it? Think about how we do it you're writing a CV, you're writing a LinkedIn headline, you're writing a brochure for something. You want to focus on the value you create for customers or clients in this case if it is defence. So don't, again, make it punchy, but focus on how you make things better, easier, less expensive, more capable for someone else. You also want to pull on the threads from your capability statement. So if you've mentioned that you have a capability, translate that into a value statement. So with this capability, we create this value for clients and customers. But it is also important in here to include any specific technical capabilities that you want to highlight. So if you have specific technical capabilities around 3D printing, additive manufacturing, if you're in the space of combat ration packs or any of those sorts of things, what are you doing that someone else isn't doing? Now, why this is important is for, say, some big projects or huge acquisition projects that might be or that might have ties to overseas, say like armored fighting vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles that have roots in parts of Europe. Well, there's certain technical capabilities and technical standards that are going to be able to be used in Europe used in Australia, used internationally. So start putting some thought into what that looks like. Now that's very specific to um, a manufacturing or a parts supplying kind of mentality. But for anyone that is in the service based or um, professional services based industries, well, do you have trademarked frameworks? Do you have um, any proprietary software that you use or any proprietary capabilities that you want to highlight here that that might get you elevated above someone else of similar capability? If you want to here, you can use images sparingly. Um, and this is where I've seen issues with great effect is if you're saying you have a certain level of tooling, say for CNC machines, you're using harsh equipment, put a photo of it in there because someone who is in supply chain or someone who is in project management isn't necessarily going to understand what those things are, but they understand what a cool machine looks like. And so as you start to talk about that, it's almost like you're going, hey, prove it is. This is a photo of our workshop. This is a photo of the equipment we use. So, but what I don't want you to do here is flood this with images because images with no explanation or no context are just going to confuse people, which is really not what we want to do. Now I'll move into the things that make you different. So we talked about this a little bit in the previous section, but this is what definitely makes you different from someone else. It might be that you have the ability to operate across multiple locations simultaneously. It might be that you have some particular certifications or qualifications, whether it be academic or otherwise, in your organization that other people don't have. Now, the important thing here is we don't want to waffle on. And as I said before, family owned is not a differentiator. Veteran owned or Indigenous owned is not a differentiator. That's more talking about the capability space as well. But when you're looking at what makes us different, don't think so much about what makes you different as a bunch of humans. What makes you different in terms of the capability you provide? If you have some other things I've seen here that people have thought provide points of difference, but don't. Uh, Things like design and manufacture. Great, fair enough. That might be a player in other places. But if you can't tie that to a specific capability, then it's going to just be lost in the noise as well. Because a lot of organizations have a design to manufacturer to support capability. If you have proprietary software, you have patents, you have trademarks that all contribute to your ability to move quicker, move faster, to be more innovative and work with clients to come up with tailored and targeted solutions. Great. That makes you different because as I said at the start of the presentation, people want to work with people. So if you can say, if they only have to work with you to get all this stuff done with the number of, the 10,000 requirements that defense programs have, then that's awesome. So that's really, really important there. In the defense space here, you might want to talk about things like if you hold if you hold security clearances with people on strength, if you hold the ability to work in secure facilities, to hold classified data, to hold ITAR or export restricted data, then these are all things that will make you different because you have to be able to work in that space to work in defense industry. And if defense has to invest less in you or a prime has to invest less in you to get you up to speed, then that's great. Now, a lot of the primes do have programs. You don't have to have all this sorted. A lot of the primes do have programs and pathways to help invest in small businesses to uplift them. The point here is to not have everything, you don't have to have everything sorted, but if you can show you understand what needs to be done, then that goes a long way as well, because now they don't have to explain it to you. And of course, it is like when you do a CV, like when you do a proposal, tailor it to the customer or industry you're targeting. So if you are looking to contract for we've got for everyone that's seen the large scale defense programs, you've got JP, which is a joint program, so tri-service. you've got air, land, and sea programs. So if you're looking to contract with a prime for an air program, understand what that means and tailor your language and tailor your points of difference to something that is applicable to the aviation industry. If you are doing something that is for a land program or just for soldier combat systems, target your language and points of difference to that industry. Because even though it's all defense industry, there are different points of difference that are going to make or break your ability to contract and supply into those environments there. And then our final section is the proof we can do what we say. So if you've gone and put in a lot of great information about your capability, your points of difference, how you do what you do, and you've sold it, but you can't back it up with any proof or any data, then it's just going to sound like waffle. And it's going to sound like a shiny, glossy brochure from any sort of used car salesman telling you it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And it's not going to get you anywhere. So the challenge here is that a lot of people, well, if they're seeing this for the first time, they'll think, well, geez, we haven't worked with defense before. That's okay. What have you worked in? Have you done stuff in heavy industry? Have you done stuff in aviation? Have you done stuff in the heavy transport industries? All of this contributes to the idea that you understand what might be required of you as a defense industry supply chain member. So things to focus on here, the agencies or companies you've worked with, but focus on what you did for them. So something I've seen here that is not really appropriate, but gets used all too often, is just a bunch of logos with companies that you've subcontracted to. That's great. First of all, I'd ask is, did you use it? Did you use a logo without gaining permission? Because now you're risking copyright infringement. But it doesn't tell me what you did for them. It doesn't tell me how you contributed to the project. So it needs to be tangible and it needs to be applicable to what we're talking about in here. So some examples here is you supplied equipment racks and assemblies for C5000. Now that's a program with that sort of number in it is a huge program. It's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars of investment. Great. If you only had a small part in that, that's fine. It means you've worked in the ecosystem before. But equally, you can say that you supplied impact-rated mounting assemblies for a mining project. Well, great. If I'm doing a supply chain assessment or an engineering assessment, and I can see you've supplied impact-rated mounting assemblies for a mining project, well, that might tell me that the stuff you can do will be applicable for infantry vehicles, for mechanized vehicles, for tanks, for aircraft, for ships, all these things that are going to have to operate in very difficult environments. Well, it tells me you know what you're talking about. And it tells me that you have done something like this before. So this doesn't have to be war and peace here. Focus on probably just 2 or 3 things that you have done. If you can put companies in there that you have worked with, great. It's starting to tell a story that you can do these things, but you understand the language that you need to work in to operate in defense. Because like we talk about on the podcast all the time, it's like a different language when you're working in defense industry. It's like a different language when you're contracting with the government. It is heavy, it is cumbersome, and these little things like understanding a project number or understanding things like impact rated mounting assemblies, those little things start to build tiny breadcrumbs of confidence in the engineers and supply chain managers that you can come and play in the big pool, because that's where you want to be ultimately. So that is the TLDR version of what is a quad chart. We talked about the importance of putting your business name on there. Please don't forget to put your business name on there. I know that I've got to say it again because I've seen it before, is all this great information. We don't even know who you are or how to contact you. So great. When you're putting your contact details on there, people want to talk to people. They don't want to talk to a group inbox because, as we talked about on the podcast as well, If you're not getting back to people in a timely fashion, it's going to get you removed from the project, plain and simple, because the timeframes that these things operate in, while they may seem long, decisions need to be made very, very quickly. Focus on who you are, what you do, what makes you different, and a bit of proof that shows that you're not just spinning up fancy stories for a shiny brochure about a used car full of sand. So, and finally, please use a quad chart format. You don't have to use exactly this where everything goes, but break it into clear sections that communicate what you want to communicate in a logical fashion. So as someone's reading this, as someone's reading 100, 200 of these things, you stand out because you've made it easy for them to read, easy for them to process. So that is, in a nutshell, the too long didn't read version of a quad chart, what it is, why it's important, and why you need one. So I didn't see any questions in the chat specifically. I'll drop the share right now. We'll try it to the forum. Anyone who has worked in this space or who wants to add anything, or even ask any questions. What do you got? Let's chat about it.
I think you covered it quite well. My only thing is, do you have one? I've got an example of one that's been completed for a real business, which I can show after the recording. But did you have any examples?
Not here. I
Yeah.
lost those ones when I left my former employer.
Yeah, no, it's probably best we don't share on record anyway.
I've got a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Abby.
James, I've got a couple of questions, and if they're too specific for a group discussion, please just, I'm happy to take it offline. So shut it down if it's not appropriate. But in the first section of the quadrant, the quad chart, under the who we are, when you touched on, if it's vet or Indigenous support, and if you're not that, then maybe you can show some capabilities as far as how you support those initiatives. Well, my question is there a way to find out what is important to defence on that criteria? For example, is 50% female owned an important criteria and worth listing, or does it fall under, well, Australian owned and it's not written? So is there somewhere that it sort of gives us a chance to understand what they're looking for, and therefore if you've got that capability to list it? And secondly, in demonstrating support of initiatives such as Indigenous, we do some stuff in Australian Power Equipment. We support Indigenous initiatives, and we support a whole bunch of community stuff, but that's not employing people in our organisation. That's giving sponsorships and money to support and proactively demonstrating our values by actions. And I'm just wondering about the appropriateness of that to go in sort of to that level, because you don't want to greenwash, you don't want to defense wash, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to, of how applicable some of these things can be, and to view it from defence eyes.
Good question. So to your first one, early in the supply chain. So say if you met someone at a trade show, or you're submitting this as part of your entry into an approved supplier list, then you're not necessarily going to understand, or there's not necessarily going to be information around what defence is looking for specific to that project or specific to that bid. Now, if that does come later, when the approach to market comes out through AusTender, which we're going to do another episode in the next few months on what AusTender is, how to register, and how to pull information out of that. When that information comes out, when those approaches to market come out, they will have very clear expectations about the Australian industry capabilities, social outcomes, social contribution, those sorts of things. So early on, not so much, but if there's an active bid on, then you should have a lot of clarity around what's important, and you can tailor from that point. Yeah. To your second point there, I completely agree with what you're saying. It's important not to greenwash or to do these things for the sake of just putting in words. And all too often we do see that, because it becomes more about the words we say rather than the actions we have. So I could say in your case there, Abby, it might give you some ability to just, or it might give you some focus just to put a one-liner in there about to say a established supporter of, for example, Indigenous community outcomes or veteran employment outcomes, that kind of thing. And then in your broader capability statement, you can start to go into what some of those actually are. Now, if you are part of an active bid, the people who engage with the supply chain folks who are engaging with you on that bid to understand what you bring to the fight, they're going to be they should be very specific around what they're looking for from you about what you're contributing to the community. So this is very focused, a one-liner to say that, hey, there is something there that might spur on further questions. Great. I'd leave the other stuff and the more detail to when you're actually writing the bid.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Great. Daniel, I can see your hand up virtually. Go ahead.
Thanks. Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Awesome. Yeah, there's two sides to an A4 piece of paper. What would you recommend put on the other side of the quad chart, if that makes sense? Or can you extrapolate it out so there's two on one side or two on the other? Or what's your thoughts on that?
I've seen you want to have the quad chart portion just on one page because that kind of condenses your information and focuses you on the punchy stuff. I have seen with good effect to have on the back side a simple capability statement or maybe some extra points about some extra information on things in there, particularly around technical specifications, unique equipment that you have, those sorts of things. But I'd focus on keeping the quad chart to a single page because that's what's going to be passed around the supply chain community. And I'd say extra detail for your capability statement. So remember, this isn't necessarily going to win you work, but it's going to get you. It's done well. It keeps you in the conversation.
Okay. Any other questions? And then we'll stop the recording. Nope. Okay, cool. Let me stop the recording.